Hello, and welcome to this brave new world of virtual events online and a fantastic exclusive event for Waterstones Live with two of the biggest selling and best and most consistent writers you could hope to get in one virtual space, by the way, courtesy of Waterstones. I'm Phil Williams. I'm hosting this for you. I'll be asking the questions. I'll be asking some of your questions as well that you submitted when you registered for this event. I'm the one that hasn't sold millions of books. I'll do the formal introductions. Not that either of these guests need them. John Grisham is the writer of blockbuster hits like The Firm and The Pelican Brief. There are 300 million John Grisham books in print around the world. And in 2017, John took us to Camino Island to witness an audacious heist of 5 manuscripts of F. Scott Fitzgerald's only novels. And today he takes us back there for Camino Winds and a murder perpetrated during a tropical storm which the bookshop owner from the first novel attempts to solve. Hey, John, welcome.
Hello, Phil. Happy to be here.
Michael Connelly is the creator of the Bosch and Lincoln Lawyer series of novels, as well as much-loved characters like Renee Ballard, Rachel Walling, and the newspaper journalist Jack McAvoy. It's Jack who's back in Michael's latest. It's out today. It's called Fair Warning. Michael has sold over 74 million books worldwide. Mike, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here with both you guys.
Don't tell them, but I'm buzzing to be hosting this with both of them. It's such a thrill. And to add to that, if you've yet to buy their books yet, and you want to go to Waterstones' website and purchase both of their books, then both Camino Winds and Fair Warning have a discount from Waterstones if you place the word Camino Warning into the promo box at checkout. So you know when you buy a book and you put it in your basket, you click checkout, you get the promo box. Put Camino Warning, all one word, no spaces. Camino from John's book, Warning from Mike's. Camino Warning, all one word. Put that in the promo box, and both books will be reduced to just £12. And you can do that throughout and also after this broadcast has finished. So look, first of all, obviously we're all in our homes. How's lockdown been for you as people? How have you adjusted to it? And also as writers, and have you had to write through it? Mike, you want to go first?
Well, I mean, I've been kind of sheltering in place for a long time before we had to, because I'm a writer and I work from home. In more recent years, I've been working on a TV show, but for the most part, it's kind of normal for me to be by myself and at home. So I can't really complain. I guess I ended up being pretty lucky. On a creative level, though, it stalled me out for a while because I write very contemporary stuff, and who knows how this is all going to turn out. So it's hard to be writing a book that's going to come out this November when I don't know, where we're going to be in November.
John, same for you?
Yeah, I'd echo what Mike said. I went into isolation 30 years ago, and as writers, we rarely collaborate. We work every day alone. I work in an office with no phones, fax, internet, no music. It's a quiet, dark space, and I've been doing that for 30 years. And so that kind of gets you prepared for something like this. From a selfish point of view, I guess we consider ourselves lucky. The biggest change for me so far has been the lack of travel. I was scheduled to go to, I think, 3 book festivals, including one in Lyon, France, where last time I saw Mike was there 3 or 4 years ago. Great book festival. Those are all canceled, so we can't go anywhere. So I do have nothing to do but write. And so and I started I started writing a legal thriller every year on January the 1st, and I get a lot of work done the first 3 months of the year. And so this thing kind of made it easier to stay home and write all the time. So my next book is going to be a whole lot thicker than my last one.
But I know I should explain that I've launched a podcast this week called Bestseller. So Mike and I have already done a bit of a pre-chat, John, and because Mike's episode 1, and in that you told us that there was a 5-week period, Mike, where you just couldn't write at all. You weren't in the right headspace, and that was the first time since university, you said, that where you just hadn't written for 5 weeks. That must have really freaked you out.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's funny. I'm finding out John and I are kind of on the same schedule. I started a new book in January. It comes out in the fall. The book I was writing was set in April. It has some courtroom drama. And then when we get to April, the courts were closed in LA County in March. So what I was writing didn't make sense if I was going to reflect the real world. So it really stalled me out. I had to figure out what to do, back up, start telling the story, set it in 2019 perhaps, or whatever. And so, yeah, it was a long period of not writing for the first time in probably my adult life. And but I got through that, and now I'm back on track. And as John was saying, mine probably won't be thicker, but I was able to make up for the lost time because there's not much else to do but write right now.
John, I hear you saying to Stephen King that you're gonna leave it alone. So when it comes to writing stories set in 2020, will you just not bother doing that because you don't want to write about coronavirus?
I can't imagine writing about this pandemic or related topics. But then again, I've also learned to never try and predict what you're going to write about. For example, yesterday, a lawyer filed a lawsuit here against a large nursing home corporation because 2 or 3 people who worked there died. So he filed wrongful death, big lawsuits. And these workers were low-wage people who could not get the proper PPE. They were unprotected. They kept begging their employers for masks and shields and all that, and you wouldn't give them the materials, the supplies, the equipment. And so they died. And that's the first big lawsuit's filed. Litigation is going to start happening like crazy. The cruise lines have been sued. So, I can't say I won't touch this topic because that's what I like to write about. I like to pursue the legal issues, and this may indeed one day play out in a novel.
It's so great that you're here together for Waterstones tonight, because I think there's so many common threads running through your new books. So first of all, you've both revisited previous characters. So I'd like to ask you both, John, if you can take this one first. Why did you choose to do that? So why did both of you choose to do that? And obviously with John, we should explain it. It's Bruce Cable from Camino Island, and it's more than just Bruce, because it's Noel and it's Mercer and the whole cast.
Well, I started Camino Island probably the first one, probably 4 years ago. I've been collecting rare books for 30 years now, and I'm fascinated with that hobby. And it's fun to follow. And about 4 years ago, I read a story about the theft of some rare books and manuscripts. And there's a lot of thievery in that world, and because libraries are notorious for having pretty weak security. Anyway, that gave me the idea to write a mystery or a story about stolen rare books, something I enjoy. And that led to the first Camino Island. And by the time I finished the book and published Camino Island 3 years ago, I really liked the setting. I liked the characters. I liked the bookstore. I liked the talk about the industry, writers, publishers, agents, all that. And the book did very well. And when I finished that book, I knew I would go back there for more stories. And Camino Winds is the second. There will be a third. Not sure beyond that. But I just really enjoyed writing about something other than lawyers, lawsuits, law firms, courts, appeals, litigation, the things my bread and butter. I still enjoy the legal thrillers. I'm almost finished with the next one now because I have nothing to do but write. But I really, over the years, I've taken more and more diversions from kids' books to sports books to, now Camino books. It's just still restless, still looking for a good story. When I get one, I'll write the book.
And what about you, Mike, with Jack McAvoy? Why bring Jack back now?
A couple of reasons. One is the same thing, just a different voice, change things up a little bit. Also, there's a growing erosion of trust in the media in my country, if not the whole world. Jack McAvoy is a journalist. I was a former journalist. So this is, well within my radar to be concerned about and want to explore it in a book. So, it is a thriller. So it's a journalist pursuing a hidden truth, all the standard stuff. But along the way, there's some commentary about what's going on in our world today in terms of media. And he's a character I could do that through.
Yeah, there's a quote I was going to read from your work, Mike, which I think is Jack, where it's just that I feel like this is where we've come to. I said, fake news, enemy of the people, the president cancelling subscriptions to the Washington Post and New York Times, the LAPD thinks nothing of just throwing a reporter in jail. At what point do we take a stand? John, do you share that perspective?
Yeah, we're at a point now where you're not sure you're not sure who to trust. There's so many media outlets that are not trustworthy and deal in untruths and semi-truths and outright fake news. It's very disconcerting to not know who to trust and where to get your news. And it's frightening. And then to see the president constantly bash the press and make the reporters out to be the bad guys and to try to undercut their credibility is it's not healthy for a democracy. It's pretty frightening.
And we should explain, Mike, for people who aren't familiar, John's background in law before writing. Your background was in journalism with the LA Times before writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different world back then. I've been a journalist in 25 years, and it was a cushy gig then, and newspapers were fat and happy, and that time is long gone. So I write about a different landscape, but I still have the same affinity for the job and instincts and things like that. And the stuff John's talking about is really the starting point of this book. It's kind of it's kill the messenger. That's what it is. You don't like the message, you don't like the truth coming out, then you attack the truth bringer, the truth seeker, and it's really become almost its own pandemic in at least the United States.
And the other thing that both of your books had in common, it struck me reading them, is that you've both decided to solve a mystery, but not through a cop. So in your book, Mike, we've discussed he's a newspaper reporter. And John, in yours, he's an independent bookshop owner. And if people read the first book, they know that he's a bit dodgy as well, isn't he?
He's a bit dodgy, yeah. He's he thank God for fiction. He owns a bookstore that's very profitable. That's to talk about fiction. But he makes a lot of money off of his bookstore. It's a powerhouse bookstore. He also trades in rare books and makes money there. He's also known to a few of the federal authorities as a dealer who will dabble in the black market, where he makes a lot of money. So he's kind of a dodgy guy. He's a ladies' man, a serious drinker, loves young ladies, especially those on book tours who are unaccompanied, and he's kind of a rogue. Even though he loves books and writers and publishers and bookstore, he loves his bookstore. But I've never met a bookseller like Bruce Cable. I've been asked to compare him to somebody. He's totally fictional. But he in Camino Winds, one of his writers. He's like the dean of writers in this little community, and they hang out around the store, and that's the epicenter of the literary life on Camino Island. One of his buddies is killed in the middle of a hurricane. It's a great time to kill somebody, and he and two buddies take off like overgrown Hardy Boys to solve the mystery. And they're not cops or journalists or whatever. They had to figure out who killed their friend and why, and it turns into a real murder mystery.
What do both of your sets of friends say to you about the fact that you make a living by killing a lot of people? Mike?
Most people don't understand what other people do for a living, so I don't really get caught on that. I get a lot of people saying, like, how do you sleep at night? And it's like, I'm so far removed from it. Like maybe real police detectives have a hard time sleeping at night, but writers, as far as I know, don't. It's just something that's in the computer and then it's on the page and I can leave it at the end of the day. I think most of my friends are just jealous that before this lockdown ever happened, I got to work at home and set my hours and things like that. And most people don't get to do that.
John?
I agree with Mike. We're so detached from what we write. I mean, you can't, again, we've both written a lot of books, okay? We both killed a lot of people. I told one person that the reason I killed a writer is because I've killed so many lawyers and judges over the years. It was time to knock off a writer. And so I did that in Communal Winds. But look, people know it's fiction. They know that's why they buy it. It's escapist fiction and entertainment. That's what I aspire to write, is hopefully a high quality of popular fiction that people will see as entertainment and enjoy. I don't, some of my books deal with serious matters, serious issues, legal issues, things like that. But once I finish a book, I'm on to the next one. I don't dwell on what I've written. I don't get too attached to the characters or the issue. I'm off pursuing another story.
So I hadn't read Camino Island and got 10 pages into Camino Winds and thought, I need to go back. I wanted to go back. So I went back. And quite near the beginning of Camino Island, there's a quote which really made me chuckle. So I thought, I'm going to put the quote to you and ask you which type you guys are. I think, John, you might know what's coming. And the quote is, some writers are seasoned raconteurs with an endless supply of stories and quips and one-liners. Others are reclusive and introverted souls who labor in their solitary worlds and struggle to mix and mingle. John, you can go first because it's your quote. Which one are you?
It's probably half and half. I enjoy the solitude. I enjoy the quiet. I don't have a wide circle of friends. But I was also a lawyer for 10 years and spent a lot of time in courtrooms talking to juries and trying to sway and argue. And also I was in politics when I was very young, and I had 2 campaigns, and I made speeches. And so I can kind of turn both off and on. I love a good dinner party with plenty of food and wine and lots of good stories by me or the next guy. As long as you have good storytellers at the table, you're going to have a fun dinner. And so I'd go both ways.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm in the middle. Probably my favorite spot is by myself writing, but you got to put gas in the tank, and you got to get to that point where you can write. So at least me, I'm always throwing out a net. I wasn't a lawyer, I was a reporter, and so I kind of live vicariously through other people, and got to keep that going if you're going to keep writing books. So I do have a very public part where I spend a lot of time with police detectives and defense lawyers and the kind of people I want to write about, and just sit back and listen. Everyone's a good storyteller. I never get disappointed by anything like that I set up and spend some time with someone, and invariably it puts gas in the tank, and I'm heading towards my next story.
The other thing that both of your new books have in common is that they've both got a bit of science at the heart of them. And I'm wary to say too much about that because I don't want to reveal any plot spoilers, but is that just a coincidence, or did both of you have a concern about, Mike, in your book, the way that genetics and ancestry sites are going? And in yours, John, it's about care homes and patients, isn't it, as well?
Well, you gotta have. By the way, Mike, I read 100 pages of your book last night, and my wife and I got bored last year, and we decided to pay $100 each to go to one of the sites, I won't name it, to get our DNA checked to see what's our, where we come from. We thought we knew, and we were correct. There's nothing exciting back there. I thought nothing of it until last night when I'm reading your book, and I'm thinking, did I just voluntarily give up my DNA to some company, some corporation, some lab? I did, and I paid them $100 for the privilege of giving up my DNA to somebody else. I never thought about it until last night. So you cost me a good night's sleep.
No, I mean, I don't want to slight all that industry. The whole thing started. Well, Phil's question was about technology. I'm always interested in that because of what John and I do. For every great advance that we make in technology, there's going to be somebody out there who's going to figure out how to turn it against us and use it for nefarious means. And, that's a pitch over the plate to somebody like me. And again, my last answer, it's always throwing out the net. And, some of it's not interpersonal meetings and so forth. It's just reading and being aware of what's going on in the news. And, last year, the Pentagon put out a directive to everyone in the military service in the United States not to give their DNA to any of these analytic sites because of concerns over security. That set the light bulb off over my head, and I took a deep dive into that, and fair warning came out of it.
Now I'm really worried. I'm even more worried now, Mike.
Well, I have a fictional company that doesn't probably have the same security measures as the $100 companies. I'm at a $23 company.
John, in your book, we should explain that the science lick leads. It's basically a whistleblower which gives the murder victim the story for the novel. So there's not a novel within the novel, but you talk about this novel in yours. I wondered whether you actually got close to writing that as your book.
No, it's pretty far-fetched. It's I'm not going to give away the plot, but it's really a far-fetched idea. That's the novel within the novel. The writer who was murdered for a reason, and our heroes, our band of Hardy Boys here, they believe it's because of the novel he was about to publish, the novel he was writing. So that they think that got him killed, and so that's where the mystery goes. I'm not going to tell you if it's true or not, but the book he was writing was about the nursing home industry and some of the abuse there, and it got too close to home for some of the big nursing home corporations, and so you got to have good bad guys. In any kind of suspense or mystery or thriller, you got to have your bad guys can make or break your story. And in this case, I really went to far out fiction, almost implausible fiction, to create a couple of drugs that do some miraculous things and blah blah blah. That's all I'm going to say about the plot. I'm giving too much away.
They're both great, fantastic page turner, pacey thrills. What you come to expect from these two gentlemen. Another thing I thought you both got in common that I wanted to ask you about tonight was what happens when Hollywood gets involved. So there you are, you're solitary, you're doing your stories. You've both had experience with film and TV. Do you enjoy those experiences? And does that then change the way that you write? If you're bringing a recurring character back, have you then got the actor that we've seen on the big screen in your head instead of who was in your head to start with? Mike, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I mean, you just try to keep that as arm's length. It's always interesting. It's vanity and all that stuff. But, you know, in my case, I just always remember I'm a book writer first. And I kind of look at all the Hollywood stuff as dabbling in it. And, you know, and it's weird. I've written about Harry Bosch since 1992. So when a TV show started in 2016, I think it was, my vision of Harry Bosch was impenetrable. So I don't see Titus Welliver as Bosch when I'm writing the books. As much as I love what he does on the show, I think he's perfect. I don't see him yet. But for some reason, Matthew McConaughey did filter into my writing about the Lincoln lawyer guy. And I hear his voice more than I see his image. Because when I write, I'm really hearing stuff more than I'm seeing it. But somehow he's infiltrated, and it's mostly because I was a newer character, and I think you know, wasn't as set in my creative mind as Harry Bosch.
John?
Yeah, you know, Matthew's first big movie was A Time to Kill, and he 1995, 1996, and they were ready to start filming. I had nothing to do with the movie, but I did have the right to veto the top 2 or 3 actors, and one was Jake Bergantz, the lawyer hero, and they had the crew and a cast, crew, budget, screenwriter, everything ready to film down in Mississippi, and they didn't have the star. They didn't have Jake Bergantz, and we were going back and forth, and I was vetoing some actors who weren't going to work. And Joel Schumacher called timeout, and he said, "Let's take a look at this kid. He's unknown, but I can get a screen test." And from the moment we saw Matthew, we said, "This is our guy," and it worked out great for him. He was great in The Lincoln Lawyer. And the odd part about that question is, I'm writing a sequel, almost finished with a sequel to A Time to Kill. It's called A Time for Mercy. It'll be out in October, and I spent 2 hours this morning in the courtroom with Jake Bergantz. So I've written 600 pages of the book, all about Jake and his life and his friends and his cases and all that. And I got to tell you, I can't disassociate Jake from Matthew. I think Matthew will always be viewed as Jake and Jake as Matthew. So, and that's a good thing. It doesn't bother me, but I was lucky to get Matthew to star in that movie, and people today think he's the real Jake Bergantz.
So the book that comes out in November, if that's a movie, it's going to cost you a few more dollars to get Matthew, isn't it?
Phil, listen, I have not had a movie made in 15 years. I have not had a feature film made in 15 years, which is, you know, if you look at the early success of the movies, the 25 years ago, the first wave of movies, they were very successful. Again, I had nothing. I don't make movies. I didn't write the screenplays, but they, you know, those worked. Everybody made money, and for some reason that model does not work today in Hollywood. There's so few serious, smart adult dramas made by the studios, and they have the money. So I have not had a feature film adapted in 15 years, and I've stopped trying. They're all for sale. I'd love to see them all adapted into great movies because we all love a good movie. But I'm not actively out there trying to, you know, convince some producer to make my movie. That's not my world.
We've got loads of questions from people who've registered for this event, so we'll get to those very shortly as well. But Mike, as John's already teased his next book, you're both also, another coincidence I found, you're both in a 2-book-a-year year, and your second book is A Return for Mickey Haller, who Matthew McConaughey, that we just spoke about, played as well in the film Lincoln Lawyer. So it's another in the Lincoln Lawyer series. Again, due in the autumn. Why have you chosen to revisit the Lincoln Lawyer for your next book?
I think because in the last 5 years, I've been so intensive on writing about Bosch, you know, both on a TV show and then in books, that this was kind of like a breakout year to do something different. And when I write about Jack McAvoy, the reporter, because I was a reporter, it's a real streamlined writing period, and I can write those books usually faster than anything else I write. And that often gives me the opportunity to do 2 in a year. And so I've done it maybe 4 or 5 times, and it seems like at least 3 of the times I've written 2 books in a year or published 2 books in a year. I've had Jack McAvoy as one of them.
I'm getting so many messages in the chat window that I really want to try and share some of these with you, because people are really enthused by what they're seeing. Cindy, I love this. You both inspired me more than you could ever realize. A lot of people saying, wanting to know how many books you read in a month, because it's often said that great writers are also great readers. John, can you put a number on it first?
I don't know how many a month. I start a lot of books I don't finish. Mike and I both receive a lot of books from publishers, editors, other writers, advanced reading copies or hardback books, or, you know, trade, whatever. We get a lot of those in the mail, and sometimes a book will come in with some pressure behind it from an editor I know or a publisher, or maybe my agent says, hey, you know, take a look at this. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you'll blurb it. So I start a lot, and I give any book like that 50 pages, and usually I don't finish. When the pandemic started, I told myself I was going to do something, a reading project that I would always remember because of the pandemic. And so I'm halfway through reading all 6 of Walker Percy's novels. And he was a great writer. He died about 30 years ago, and he's difficult to read. I just finished, let me see, Ian Rankin is one of my favorite crime writers. Finished his book. Harlan Coben's a favorite. I got I started Mike's book last night. I didn't get it until yesterday, the PDF, and I read 100 pages last night. I've got Scott Turo's book, his latest. I'm almost finished with a really fun book. It's called The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. It's about the Battle of Britain, the Blitz in 1940 to 1941. I enjoy reading about World War II, so I'm kind of all over the place, but a lot of reading going on right now.
Mike?
Now I feel bad because I'm not doing a lot of reading. I have a problem where reading really intrudes on my writing. I like to be writing all the time, so I kind of have periods of reading. The other aspect is that, you know, most of the places when people can be reading, I can be writing, and I choose to do that. So what I found mostly is I'll fire up an audio book and, you know, and listen to it while I'm driving or when I'm exercising, and that's mostly how I'm consuming my books.
Emma Wilson says, so much talent on this webinar. Oh, thank you, Emma. I think she means thank you. The way they churn out books is incredible. How do you do that? John, you first. How do you keep the pace of the release so high as well as the quality of the story?
Well, you have to understand that Mike and I have nothing to do but write. We're full-time writers. And after you write a few books and publish them and sell them, you realize, you know, there's a certain amount of discipline involved. He and I both started a book in January to finish by midsummer, me by July 1st, and publish in the fall. I've been doing that for a long time. As far as the ideas and the words, I mean, I spend my time reading about lawsuits, cases, law firms, courts, appeals. That's where my interest is because of my background in the law. And I follow a lot of lawsuits, and there's just a lot of issues involving daily life that come up, headlines. And I scan newspapers and magazines, always stalking a story, and the material is endless. I tell people when I watch lawyers, if you watch lawyers, the material is endless. And so I get a lot of great ideas.
You mentioned Ian Rankin. He keeps a little file of yellow Post-it notes and writes odd sentences on that he knows he might go back to when he needs to work out what the next book is. Do you do anything like that, either of you? John first.
I don't walk around with a notepad. I have a friend who's not a writer, but he's a business guy, and he walks around with an index card. He's always pulling out, writing something down. He could be losing his mind. I don't know, but I've never been tempted to walk around taking notes. I've also learned as I mature that if I have a great thought, a great name, a great scene, a great line, if I don't write it down soon, it's probably going to be gone forever. So I'm always trying to get to the computer, open a file, and write something down.
Mike?
Yeah, I used to have that philosophy that if it's the right thought, right idea, I won't forget it. And I've forgotten some pretty good stuff, I'm pretty sure. So I also, exact same thing. I don't walk around with notebooks or anything like that, but you instinctively know, like, that could be a good title, or this could be a good concept to start a story with. You write it down. Usually these things, it's a very mystical process. One of your questions was, how do we keep doing this? It's like, it's a mystery. And if you don't know why you can do it deep down, you can believe it could go away. So you cherish it, and you have a work ethic, and you try to get better at it every day. And so that's what I do. And so normally I'm in the middle of writing a book, and so for some reason I can't really explain, I'll get the idea for the next book. It'll just come through. It'll be maybe a title. It'll be a scene that I know will expand. It'll be something somebody did, but I have to stop what I'm doing and write all my thoughts on that down on a separate thing, so I don't forget it.
And are you a disciplined time of day writer, Mike? I think John's very much a morning writer, from what I've heard him say in other interviews.
Yeah, same with me.
Right. And are you both planners?
Early as I can.
Are you both planners? Do you both know? Do you know the end when you start writing? Mike first.
Yeah, I don't outline, but I don't start till I know the beginning and end. Generally, the end. It can change. It's changed a few times, but for the most part, I have it right from the beginning.
John?
One of my rules for writing popular fiction is don't write the first scene until you know the last scene. Because when you write what we write, mystery, suspense, crime, thrillers, the plots can get intricate, and you better know where you're going when you start, or it's easy to get lost. And so I outline. It's a pretty extensive outline. Once I know the ending, once I know the beginning with a hook that'll snare the reader, and once I think I can maintain the narrative tension for a long time in the middle, and I like the story, I'll write down chapter 1, write a paragraph. What's going to happen in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, all the way to chapter 40, and that takes a lot of work. It's not any fun, but it really the more time I spend on the outline, the easier the book is to write.
Well, as a reader, let me tell you both that I just think it's remarkable that each time I pick up one of your books, I just feel instantly secure in the book. I hope that makes sense. And what I mean by that is that you just trust the writing. You know that you're going to go on a fantastic journey with these books. And I think that's an incredible skill. And if it was easy, more of us would be doing it, and we're not.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice.
That's very nice. Yeah, I mean, it's you want to have this feeling of authority that the reader gets when they enter a book. I mean, John talking about, John hasn't been a lawyer since I think he said 30 years. He self-isolated, but he's tracking all that, and that comes out in the books. This idea that when you get into one of these books, you're with somebody, you're riding in a car with somebody who knows what they're doing and knows where they're going, even though you may not.
Yeah. James on the chat window says, Michael, has Harry Bosch been, quote, retired? Because we know in the last couple of stories he's retired from the main force, but has he been retired from your books, at least as a main character?
No, he'll be back. I have no plans at the moment to end him.
Question for John from Alexia Drew, who's with us tonight. Alexia says your novels tend to be standalone books with new characters. I mean, there are some recurring. You just mentioned one who's coming back. Jake's back at the end of the year. Are there any of your characters that you'd like to bring back and revisit other than Jake? Because obviously we've discussed that's happening.
Almost all are standalone books. This is Jake's third book. And one problem I'm realizing with the series or a sequel is that I cannot remember all the things I put in the first two books. And so I realized with I have a kids series, there's 7 Theodore Boone books that started 10 years ago for 12-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids. And so after about the 5th book in the Theodore Boone series, I started getting these letters from 10-year-old kids all over the country who were catching me cold dead in mistakes that I had made because I couldn't remember what I put in the first 4 or 5 books. And so I said, this has got to stop. I'm getting caught. And I'm sure Mike has never been caught wrong before. I've been caught wrong in the legal thrillers several times, just dead wrong about a street, a town, a village, a name, whatever. And it's not a fun thing to go because you got to fix it, okay? But yeah, I forgot what your question was.
Me too. So it's not just.
Can I
Mike,
ask John a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
John, you mentioned you're a collector of books. I do that a little bit too. Do you want to trade? What's your gem, your favorite collected rare book? And I'll tell you what mine is. And what if we had the same book and we think we were going to have the only one?
Well, there are 2. When Camino Winds came out, Camino Island came out 3 years ago, I was in an interview and I said, the interviewer asked me, is there one book you really want? And I said, well, I have the other 4 or 5 novels by F. Scott Fitzgerald, first editions. I have not been able to find a good condition, high quality copy of The Great Gatsby. And so my publisher heard that, they sneaked around, they bought me one, they gave it to me at a little party, and it was, I was overwhelmed with it. That's one. And I have a pristine copy of The Sound and the Fury signed by William Faulkner that I've had for 20 years. What about you?
Well, you're on a different level for me, but my favorite, I mean, Ross McDonald was a major influence on me as a writer. So I have a first edition signed copy of his first book called Blue City from, I think, 1947. But I bought it and it was in this like leather clamshell box, and it included his contract for the book. So it kind of came out of his estate. So I have the book, which I think is not that rare. People could get it.
Yeah.
But I have his signed contract, which he apparently signed on a naval ship because he was serving in the Navy when he wrote this. And so anyway, that's my special little one.
Great writer.
I'd like to know from you both, would it be possible for you to collaborate? And by that, I don't just mean write a book together. I mean, take characters, say maybe Jake from your world and maybe Bosch from your world, and would that work? Could you do a kind of collaborated joint universes, do you think?
You mean like maybe write it over Zoom like this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll defer to John, but I think it's, it's weird because when I was in the newspaper business, I often had to write with other reporters. But writing a book, it just, I can't really see sharing. How do you break that up, especially if John brings his character and I bring mine, who writes what, all that. To me, it's a difficult thing.
Agreed. I can't imagine collaborating with a novel. Maybe if it was some big work of nonfiction and you had to have a research assistant or maybe another writer to divide the labor, Maybe. I've never been tempted, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine going through the creative process with somebody else and having to get somebody else's sort of approval. And then what if I didn't like what Mike wrote? He didn't like what I wrote. It just
Right.
there's a lot of problems there, a lot of potential problems there. So I've never been tempted.
I wonder how that's working out with James Patterson. They've just announced another one, haven't they, with him and Bill Clinton?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's the master of doing that, but I don't know what that process is like.
No, you're not going to be. Neither are you going to be rushing to do one with Trump, are you?
No.
No, I would not do a book with Trump because Bill Clinton's doing one with Patterson. The problem with a lot of problems in doing a book with Trump, but the biggest problem is he doesn't read. And what would you do? It would be a nightmare.
You'd have to write it. He'd have to color it in.
I cannot imagine. Let's don't ruin the conversation, okay? Let's talk.
A question from Ross Forbes, who said to both of you, how many books in advance do you plan out? So I know you're both in a 2-release year this year. How far ahead are you, John?
I keep a list of 4 or 5 story ideas that I'll add to. If I see a magazine article, I'll clip it and put it in a file. I'll take notes. There are always 4 or 5 ideas that percolate, and as the closer I get to January the 1st, it's when I start a new legal thriller. I get more and more serious about what the next book is going to be, but I don't have the next book planned. I have an idea for a short book maybe this fall, but the legal thriller that I'll start in January has not really come to the forefront yet.
What about you, Michael?
I don't plan too much ahead. It's, I just have this confidence that something will come to me. So about 2 weeks ago, I got the idea, which I'm pretty sure will be the next book that I write. Just kind of came to me while I was writing the book I'm doing for the fall, and it just kind of came out of the blue. And I stopped and wrote about a half a page, and in 6 months or so, I'll look at that and see if it holds up, and then I'll go forward with it.
Gillian Beggs is watching tonight and wants to know, is there a book that either of you have read that you wish you'd written? Mike, you want to take that first?
Oh, there's tons of them, but there's so many books I can mention. So let me try to pick one. One that really struck me. I was just beginning to write my own fiction, that practicing. It wasn't anything that would get published, but I was in my early 20s, and I read Red Dragon, the Thomas Harris book, and it really. There's been dozens and dozens of books that have influenced me, and that's one of them. But just something about the influence on me while I was starting to write fiction was really important. And so I always kind of felt like, boy, I wish I had written that book.
Mm-hmm.
John, do you have one?
2 come to mind. In 1987, I was struggling to finish my first novel. And Scott Turow published Presumed Innocent, his first novel, which just kind of electrified publishing for a long time, and a huge bestseller. And Scott was all over the place. It was a big book, and his success really motivated me to get off my butt and get the first book finished. And I love the book. When I got a copy of it, it's just a classic courtroom mystery. Did he do it? And after I started writing in the early days, I read a book called Little Drummer Girl by John le Carré, who's one of my favorite writers. And it's just really, it's really smart, intelligent suspense. And I go and with a very rich historical backdrop, and I go back and read that book every 5 or 6 years.
Here's a good question from Brian Finnemore, especially because you've both, I think, Mike, I'm right saying this is book 35, isn't it, for you? And you're well over 40, John, aren't you, I think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the question is, given that you both clearly know what you're doing now, the question from Brian is, how important are editors to your work? And does the editor play the same role now that maybe they did 20 years ago? John Grisham first.
Tremendously important. I am very lucky. My agent, I've been with for 25 years. He started off as my editor at Doubleday. He bought the firm, the manuscript, in 1990. We're the same age. His name is David Gernert. He was an editor at Doubleday. He bought the firm, published my first 5 or 6 books, and then became my agent. And so he still edits everything. And he does the line edits, and I still listen to him. And I listen to my wife, who is a pretty good editor or a pretty good reader. She gets the first crack at it. And then my publisher is a friend who's been there for 25 years. And those 3 people know that they can say anything about the fiction. I'm going to listen to them. We can argue, we can discuss it. We never fight, but I still listen to them. And I think that's important.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you got to establish the relationship that, you become important to a publishing house when you're doing best-selling books, and you don't want anyone pulling punches because of that. Don't upset the talent type of philosophy. I think you can get into that, and so you have to make these arrangements and agreements with your editors that they don't do that. I have kind of a twin way of being edited, where my manuscripts go to my publishers in England and in New York, and I get feedback from a whole set of editors, and the process is really, really important. And I can very honestly say that 35 out of 35 times the books have gotten better through that process. It's not, I've never had a book that went in and came out where I was disappointed. It's always come out much better.
You have to make sure that trust is there, don't you, so that you can be in a safe space to receive that information from the editor.
Yeah, I mean, you establish that kind of communication that, as John said, say anything to me, tell me anything, embarrass me if I've written something embarrassing. You last thing you want to do, that's 1 or 2 or 3 people. Last thing you want to do is send it out to where there's thousands of people reading it and saying, boy, this is embarrassing. You want to prevent that.
Emma Wilson says, you've both written a large number of books over the years. Do you find it hard to separate yourselves from the stories in the books and real life? And do you find yourself embodying the characters as you're writing? John first?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm completely detached from the characters. And I'm with them for a short period of time. And when the book is done, it's done. After I do the 3rd, 4th, and 5th drafts of every book, I'm really sick of them. And normally by the time they publish 3 months later, I've forgotten a lot of the story. And so but I'm moving on to the next book. I'm always looking for the next story, and I just don't look back. I've never gone back and read one of my books. Sometimes I'll pick one up just at random and open it up and read a paragraph, and about half the time I'll say, ouch, that, I must have been in a hurry, because I'm always in a hurry. And then about half the time I'll say, it's not bad, but I just can't go back and read my stuff, and I don't dwell on my characters once they're gone.
Mike?
I have, because I've done a series character Bosch, been writing about him for 30 years. Attachment in terms of, when I first wrote about him, I was writing about someone completely different, and then I got lucky, and there's more books and more books, and so over time we share a lot of stuff. So I have an attachment to that character in particular, but I also share what John says, this kind of amnesia that you got to move on, and it's oftentimes on these virtual tours we're talking about books. We're already past this book. I'm so knee deep in the book I'm writing for the fall that I have to go back and reacquaint myself with the book we're promoting, because I can barely remember it because I've moved on.
Yeah, same as what John was just saying. Marks, is there any chance of signed copies? I mean, I'm sure you've both been signing plenty of copies. I'm sure they'll be around and about, but it goes back to something you both said about collecting books. Have you both got the first edition of your own books? John first.
Oh yeah, they printed 5,000 hardback copies of A Time to Kill. I bought 1,000 of them. I was going to sell them and make some money on the back end, front end, middle end. None of it worked. And I went to, I had to go to like 35 libraries in Mississippi to peddling the book out of the trunk of my car to unload all those books. And I finally stopped with about 100 to go. And nowadays I have about 75 of those pretty rare first editions.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you get them from your publishers and stuff. The one weird thing I had was one time I was doing a book signing, and someone put down a version of my first book that I never got. And that was, I forget the terminology, but it was like a galley and wraps, I think they call it. It's basically the printed manuscript in like a light blue cardboard cover. And this one had like a coffee ring on it. And, so it's really the very first version of my book, and I never got one of those. I tried to buy it from the guy, and that didn't work out.
John, I heard you saying this week that if you're in a bookstore, you like to support independent bookstores, and if you're in a bookstore just browsing, you'll happily, if they've got some of your books, you'll sign them and put them back on the shelf. But have either of you ever moved your book to a more prominent position in a bookstore? John first.
I've never moved a book. I've gone into a bookstore before and couldn't find any of my books. And so I was not angry, but I went to the clerk and I said, "Do you have any Grisham books here?" And he said, "We did, but they've all sold out." I said, "Okay, that's all right. That's a good answer." That's a good answer.
Yeah, I'll admit that I've done the front facing, the book is spine out, and then you take it out and put it face out so people see it better. Done that on occasion, secretly. You don't want to get caught doing that, though.
Kevin Rowlinson, who's with us tonight, said, if you had to write in another genre, what would it be? Have either of you dabbled in other genres other than what we both know you for, Mike?
I haven't dabbled in anything else. I don't know if this is the correct answer. I'd go into nonfiction, and I'd write. I mean, John's done that.
Yes.
As a former reporter, I love swearing off nonfiction and just being free to write fiction, and that served me for a couple of decades. And more recently, I've thought in terms of looking for a really good nonfiction story to tell.
John, in other genres? I mean, we know Mike mentioned your nonfiction there.
I've written 3 sports novels, 2 about American football, 1 about baseball. Thinking of a book about basketball. I think I have the story. Probably would do more of that. Maybe some nonfiction as far as baseball, my favorite sport. My nonfiction book was about wrongful convictions, and I'm always tempted to write more about those true stories because they are fantastic stories from a storytelling perspective because of all of the injustice and suffering that's involved in a wrongful conviction. I'll probably do that again in the future. It's not planned right now.
If you haven't read John's nonfiction book, Innocent Man on Netflix is the adaptation which you cooperate, you take part in, and I saw the first one of those this evening. Harrowing case.
Oh yeah, it's a very well done documentary film that I had almost nothing to do with, but it's just that case that I wrote about. They go back to the small town and talk to the people, and again, it's just a great story because it's so sad.
You both love baseball, Mike. I seem to recall something about Vin Scully, that you dedicated one of your books to Vin Scully.
Yeah. Iconic announcer of the LA Dodgers and many other sports earlier in his career. He's retired now. He has helped me out a couple times personally, and so he's a good friend. Don't see him that much. I don't want to exaggerate the relationship, but if you're going to write about LA like I do, the voice of Vin Scully is in your mind, and so that was certainly worthy of a Harry Bosch book being dedicated to him.
John, are the kids still playing baseball in your backyard?
Phil, nobody's playing baseball. It's so sad. We have no baseball. Baseball has survived wars and depression and recession and everything but this. And I have a ballpark I built around the corner, and we have 7 fields. We have 400 kids every year on 30 teams, and the ballpark should be packed right now, and it's completely empty. It's really it's sad for these kids who love the place and should be there playing. And there's no professional baseball, no college baseball, and it's a big, it's just a sport. It's not life and death, but it's pretty important too. And to be without it is a big loss.
So here we learned today that Premier League soccer's back on the 17th of June, but with no fans, and we play behind closed doors. Are you any closer to getting the baseball back, but maybe behind closed doors?
I've heard nothing like that. Recently, there were some plans. You hear a lot of rumors about how they might do it with no fans. What football may do in the fall with no fans, or maybe starting later in October, a shorter season. There are a lot of ideas, but the truth is we don't know where we are with this pandemic. We don't know where we are with the reopening. The resurgence of the virus. The experts over here can't even agree, and the politicians are making the decisions, not the scientists. And so it's, we all want reopening to work, but at the same time, we could be moving too fast, and we could pay a dear price for it later. If it comes back, if it spikes again this summer, all sports are going to be off, I think, for the rest of the year.
Mm. Claudia wants to know, Mike, can you reveal anything more about Murder Book, which is your podcast? So you've done one season, right?
Yeah, I did one season, and I'll have a second season coming out this summer. And it's about there's a very celebrated, well-known case in the States here about a guy named Sam Little, who the FBI says is the most prolific serial killer in history. And he was caught in L.A., and convicted of 3 murders. And then in the years after is when he started confessing, and the confessions and all that is what's captured the media. But I'm going to tell a story about how they caught him, how this one detective, a woman who was pretty fierce and undaunted, and a long time investigation ended up catching this guy.
Yeah, that's Mitty Roberts, isn't it? Who I know is a long-time collaborator of yours and helps you with all of your books. Have you got people like that, John, that you rely on, or are you using your own experience from the courtrooms? Do you still have people who are doing it now and help you out?
Yeah, I have a lot of old friends I'll call, and I'm so lazy when it comes to research. I don't really want to go do it myself, especially the legal research. But there's some lawyers I knew 30 years ago that I will call, who are still in the game. I'll call and say, for example, the book I'm writing now was set in 1990, and the laws have changed some since then. So that was the last year I practiced law. So I'll call a friend and say, hey, when it comes to procedure and trial, what was happening in 1990? The lawyers are really good about pitching in. I've called some judges before, looking for small pieces of information or about a case. So I don't have a research assistant. I enjoy some of the research. I'll go, I've been to death row in like 5 or 6 states, prisons, courthouses, law offices. When it comes to the real tough legal research, when I have to do it, I'll hire a part-time law student to go, do the grunt work, and I'll take all the credit.
We're pretty much going to run out of time. I mean, there's loads of love for you on the chat window. I just want you to know that I can't read them all out, or we'll be here till tomorrow morning, but lots of love for you both. Just let me ask you both this finally. Imagine that there's someone who has never read a John Grisham or a Michael Connelly. What's the first book of yours that they should go to? Which way would you direct them? Mike, you first.
Well, you get better at this the more you do it. So I would never send anyone to say, hey, read my first book. A book that in recent years I wrote called The Wrong Side of Goodbye, I really like, because it's a story that is set in present LA, but it goes way back into the past 50 years. And explores some interesting stuff, and then also you can see influence. We talked about Ross McDonald. You can see Ross McDonald, I hope, or I feel, in that story, and I'm pretty proud of it. And the key thing is, I think if someone reads that, they'll then check out some of my other books. And that's what we're trying to do, capture people.
John?
Tough question. Probably the nonfiction book, because even though it's a true story, it's I've told the story other ways in fiction. It's probably the most important because it's about a very, very serious issue that's still in play in this country, because we have so many innocent people in prison, and it's very difficult to get them out. And that's probably the most important book I've written.
Everybody in the chat window saying thank you to you. And I can't stress to you enough, not only are your books bringing pleasure to so many millions of people, but the fact that you've given up your time to do this for us here in the UK means that you've perked up a lot of rubbish Thursday, very overheated lockdown evenings here in the UK. So thank you both for your time and for doing this with us, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of Waterstones as well. So the books are Camino Wins is John's new one. They're both out today, 28th. So Camino Wins is John's. Mike's is called Fair Warning. And again, just to remind you that if you buy those on the Waterstones site right now, or in fact through till June the 19th, because they're that generous, then if you put the code in Camino Warning, all one word, no spaces, Camino Warning, then you will get the cover price on the hardback reduced to £12, and they'll post it out to you, and it will be all safe, and it will observe the social distancing rules in place at the moment. John Grisham, an honour, sir. Thank you very much. Michael Connelly, an honour. Thank you very much. And we should just finally say a massive shout to Will Rycroft at Waterstones, because he's been sweating behind the scenes to make sure that none of these lines dropped while we were all talking. So well done to Will. And hopefully this will be the first of many. And take care, everybody watching. Take care, you two, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Bye.